Buenas and half a day, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. The Committee on Education, Self-Determination, and Historic Preservation, Infrastructure, Border Safety, Federal and Foreign Affairs, and Maritime Transportation will now convene this oversight hearing regarding Guam Historic Resources Division and State Historic Preservation Office. Today is Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, and it is currently 2:04 in the afternoon. For the record, and in accordance with the open governmental law, public notice were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, April 27, 2021, and the second notice on Friday, April 30th, 2021. Notice of today's hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. I'd like to start with this oversight. We did have one previously. This is a continuation of the previous one that was held in April. The acting SHPO was not able to make it due to some medical reasons, and now we have the return of the SHPO himself, Mr. Patrick Lujan. So thank you for being here. And Patrick, I asked you if there was any testimony that you would like to submit, perhaps telling the people of Guam what is your role as the SHPO, and the chapters in 21 GCA that governs the office of the SHPO and the Guam Historic Preservation Office, but you don't have anything to present. So
yeah, I can verbally say it.
Okay, so go ahead if you'd like to, or we can go right into the questions. Up to you.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a quasi. It's federally mandated by the National Historic Preservation Act that every state and territory. Is it okay if I take this mask off? Or is that protocol that I leave it on? I'm vaccinated. Is it okay? It's okay. All right. So it's federally mandated that every state and territory.
Patrick, please put your mask back on, since you're so close in the vicinity to Mr. John Mark Joseph, and we are in especially a government setting. Thank you.
I know people are going to joke about that. All right. So it's federally mandated that every state and territory has a state historic preservation officer that has to be acknowledged by the state or territory governor. In this case, for Guam, the administrator of the Historic Preservation Office is the Guam Historic Preservation Officer, which I am as a classified employee. At the same time, has been identified as the State Historic Preservation Officer by Governor Leon Guerrero. So basically, the role of the Historic Preservation Office, we are in the process of the permitting process, any type of development, local, private, military, goes through our office for strict review on identifying any type of cultural resources, historic resources on that property. If it's federally funded, any type of project, whether it's a nonprofit organization, a local government entity, or the military themselves, or any other federal agencies, they have to go through what is called a Section 106 process. So that also is mandated by federal law that it goes through our office. So we pretty much review hundreds of permitting, local permits, and federal permits as well through Section 106. That's pretty much in a nutshell. The office consists of obviously the state archaeologists who I have here with me, John Mark Joseph, a staff of technicians, the state historian, and so it's a very small office of currently 11, I think, and with much room to grow to go along with all the development that's going on. So I don't think we are in a position to necessarily have the authorization to stop any type of development. However, we do have the purview of reviewing and making sure that steps are taken properly in a manner of protecting and preserving our cultural resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I'd like to at this time acknowledge Senator Joanne Brown for joining us today. Thank you, Senator Brown, for being present. Patrick, in 21 GCA Chapter 76, item number 4, Can you please explain to the people of Guam what have you done in reference to this item?
Okay, 1 second. Let me just pull that up.
I can read it for
Sorry,
you.
I didn't print it out.
Develop a territory-wide survey of historic areas, buildings, and sites with phased preservation and restoration development plan and accompanying budget and land use recommendations.
So I do know that in the past there has been strategic plans within the office. That's also a 5-year plan that is actually up for renewal. So we're currently working with the Review Board and Guam Preservation Trust to see if we can coincide, collaborate, and run our strategic plans in unison. As far as the land is concerned, I think Mr. Joseph's got a little bit more institutional knowledge regarding the overall scope and surveying of lands on Guam. I think that's what you're talking about, right? The overall scope of...
How often have you met with the Guam Preservation Trust to discuss item number 4?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How often have you met with the Guam Preservation Trust to discuss item number 4?
Oh, that's been a topic for, I would say, at least a year or so. We actually just met yesterday again on that. So we're actually looking for something that within the next 30 days, the first initiation is going to take place, data collection, review, and then getting the surveys together, and then getting community input for that. So you'll see something, it's got to be completed probably before the turn of the year. And so we're looking like within the next 3 to 6 months, we're really going to get the ball rolling on that. And it's going to be pretty encompassing, not only for land use, but everything as far as, specific projects. Again, Preservation Trust and us, we have the same mission, but a little bit of a deviation, them in the development of the preservation of what's in existence, also training, and ours is in the execution of the policies and protection.
When did the 5-year plan expire?
Ours, 2021, I believe. And so we've already got an extension from National Park Service on that, so they understand that we'll be working on that.
I think the plan expired in 2020.
Was it 2020?
Yes, so you need to ensure that you plan ahead, and it was supposed to be put out from 2021 to 2026. Okay. What is your plan to acquire, restore, and preserve historic areas and buildings in Guam?
That's going to come with the new strategic plan, actually. So that's something that I've envisioned, because everything from a local standpoint, 25 years is the cutoff for eligibility of the Guam Register of Historic Places. On the federal side, for the National Register of Historic Places, it's 50 years. And that's one aspect of the office. I think we must do a better job. That comes in play with development of our staff. Like I mentioned to you in private, there's really no middle staffing as far as that allows us to really focus on that type of aspect. So one of our internal strategic plans as far as the growth of the office is that. So as we come along and gather more technical skilled folks and expertise, that's one of the major visions that I have for the office, is to look more so into that arena. Not quite there yet. Senator.
Are you continuing any plans that you have done from the 2020 5-year plan, or are you going to completely create a new plan?
That'll be part of evaluating the previous plans, right? So we don't.
So the evaluation hasn't been done yet.
Correct, and that's going to be coming up very shortly.
When you say very shortly, what do you mean by very shortly? What is the timeline?
I think we're going to start it within the next 30 days, if not.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I have some questions here that the community has sent in, and so I'm just going to ask these questions for the public. Of course, the questions are within reason. What training have you had in Section 106, such as from the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation?
Me personally?
Yes, because you're the
office?
SHPO.
I've had Section 106 back in 2007, I think. So I'm very familiar with Section 106.
What is your prior experience and skills in historic preservation?
I was the deputy SHPO back in 2007 to 2010, and with running the administration basically at that time during that administration, allowed me to qualify for the job by law.
What is the policy of the administration to advocate historic preservation for our heritage?
With the current administration, I think it's very supportive. So they're supporting the increase of employees, which would take off a lot of the burden, especially on the permitting side, knowing full well that there's, it's hard to generate quality reviews in a timely manner. So the administration sees that. I know they're also put out a grant for more employees as well. And then also seeing the whole scope of the cradle to grave concept of curating, what is found out there, and with the Guam Museum being a huge component of the process. So it's not just the Historic Preservation Office that is being seen as needing help, but as well as our brothers and sisters at the Guam Museum with the need of technical expertise as well. So I too have provided that information and requesting the need for assistance on that.
Thank you. Please explain to the public what you have done as the acting SHPO to ensure that the historic preservation program fulfills the federal requirement as stated in Section 101 of the National Historic Preservation Act to have an adequate public participation in the historic preservation program.
So our office really is a representation of the public, and that's through the 106 process. The authorization from the governor handed down to the SHPO and to the staff, the state archaeologists, is a representation of the public. All of our cases and projects and what have you, it's open to the public, and anybody can really, we've been FOIA'd probably more than we would like, but we're not hesitant to share any of the information. So no way, shape, or form are we operating in a bubble. I think we've got a lot of solid stakeholders that work with us on a daily basis, whether it's the Preservation Trust or even the media. So again, we're not ashamed to or afraid of sharing any of that. We attend critical meetings. I don't know. I don't know what else to say as far as that.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So at this time, I'd like to acknowledge the speakers' presence, Senator Sabina Perez and Senator Chris Duenas also for joining us. Thank you, Senators, for being here, and Speaker. So Patrick, just to sum it up, the public input for public participation that you have done as the SHPO in accordance with Section 101 of the National Historic Preservation Act is basically allowing people to submit comments online through the website. Is that what that is?
No, it all depends because...
And then if we FOIA, then they can have adequate public participation through a FOIA?
Oh, well, I don't know if they're. So it all depends on what scale of the public input is, right? I mean, if we were gonna every 106 review every project that we do, it's not necessarily out there in the public, right? The big ones like the programmatic agreement and all of that stuff, then that is, on the forefront. All the PA memos are there and available, upon request, or even if it's even on the agree upon components website, right? So in that case, if it's just your onesie twosies, your smaller projects, then not that it requires public review, because they're smaller in nature, but the bigger ones are out there, open to the public.
And how do you make this open to the public? How would you justify the adequate public participation?
Turn on the mic.
Forgive me, I forgot to turn on the mic. If I may, as far as the 2011 programmatic agreement, basically they're posted on the Navy website. They're supposed to be. We also have made copies of those. We have copies of those in our office, and we post them on our doors to where the public can see them when they come by. Currently we've got an issue, I think, with their website, so it's not posted on there. But the public has always been open to come to our office, get a copy of the PA memo for each project, and then make their comments. And they're also, it's been made aware that the Navy posts them on theirs. We have a new NEPA document that's just arrived at our office for the Air Force. They plan not to have public meetings on this, so we have to make comments because I guess it's under their COVID aspect, but they will be putting it out on their website. We haven't made comments yet because we've just learned about this new undertaking at Air Force. So that is not the Navy, that is the Air Force. So we've just learned about that, and we've just learned that they do not plan to hold public meetings on this aspect. But I believe they do have on their website a place where they can have comments.
Right, so we don't have jurisdiction over what DOD does. So I'm asking, what have we done as a government body to provide adequate public participation? I understand that some of these things are on Navy and Air Force websites, but what have we done for adequate public participation?
Right. Well, as I said,
You're just allowing the documents there in your office.
The office, they're in their office for the public to pick up if they want a copy of it.
So if the public wants to review anything, they have to go down to Department of Parks and Rec and pick up those documents through the State Historic Preservation Office. Is that correct?
Correct.
And there's no web access to these documents?
I'll let Shippo answer.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay.
It's under, our
And there's
website
no-
was up as of
And
7 months ago and has to be rebooted, I guess.
So how do you alert the public, or how do you alert the public or educate the public on what is happening in your office? If there's, things that you're doing, how do you alert the public?
Well,
Like the findings down in the south, right?
press releases. We've worked with the governor's office to put out press releases in the past. So,
And how do you allow for public participation through the press release? How is the communication two ways?
we don't have the website up right now. So that was one way. Another way is, the board meetings that we do. We actually have one next week.
Are the board meetings open to the public?
It is, yeah.
Is there a website that the public can go to participate during the board meeting?
Usually there is public comment available.
But
For
do
the board
they, how do they know that the board meeting is coming up?
By law,
And how do
we're-
they participate?
Regular public announcement requirements by law, so you'll see either tomorrow or the next day an announcement in the paper, and then 2 days prior again that we're having a board meeting. And we usually have some good participation from the public that come out.
Okay, so in your advertisement of notice that you're going to have a board meeting, what do you write? We're having a board meeting on this day, and then the location?
Location, the time, the date,
Okay.
and if we have a preliminary itinerary or draft itinerary, then we would put the major topics of what will be discussed.
Okay, and then in light of COVID restrictions, how do you accommodate for that?
We haven't had one since, so
I'm sorry?
we haven't had a board meeting since, so I've been away for a little bit. And
So
so
there-
this is going to be the first time. I know GPT has been available for so we're going to probably piggyback off of their methodology as far as, the public that can't attend.
Okay.
So
So you
we'll-
haven't had a board meeting for over a year, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's unsatisfactory, but,
COVID hit us hard last year, and
COVID hit everyone hard.
Yeah,
But
understood.
there were still agencies that had board meetings and still agencies that kept the top, provided services to the people. Okay. For the MIT-PA, what kind of cultural sensitive training is being provided and the progress of the cultural sensitive training?
you have an update on that? The cultural sensitivity training?
Have you seen the cultural sensitivity training?
No, I have not.
I saw a draft, the initial draft that came out when the PA was being negotiated. I have not seen the final one. Again,
Is the MIT-PA completed? It's signed and moving forward? It's completed, right?
It was signed a couple of months ago, yes.
Okay. So you've only seen a draft, even though the MIT-PA is signed.
Yeah, I have not come around. I just got out of quarantine last week, so that has yet to make its round.
So you-
I'm just back in the office, so
And
it'll.
Who
I will see
provided
it.
input for the draft?
I'm sorry.
Who provided input for the draft?
It was a draft made by a local, longtime archaeologist on Guam that was contracted from the Navy, who supported the initial draft,
Okay.
and will make a draft.
This one for the 2011?
No, the PATT. The PATT.
So you didn't get any input from from like the Kumision or Guam Preservation Trust or CAHA? You didn't get any input from other agencies for the cultural sensitivity training?
That was part of the idea. It's not finalized. I haven't seen the finalized portion, so definitely that's gonna have to come into effect.
So we don't really know at this time until you see the final draft.
Correct.
When was the last time you met with the Guam Review Board for Historic Preservation?
That's our board, the one that we're talking about. So it's been over a year, and we're going to meet next week.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Has there been any new findings other than the one that was that was ordered to the acting SHPO by the governor? Has there been any new findings on Camp Blaz?
What was the date that you have as the latest findings?
Has there
'Cause our
has
latest-
there been any
the latest we
additional
have-
findings?
Yeah, the latest we have that was that we just received was April 13.
Actually, I believe there's one.
2021?
In my box now, so that may
Yeah.
be the April 13th.
Because the press release that the governor's office put out basically ordering the acting SHPO to release was from information on November 2020, right? So has there been any new findings since then?
Yes.
And when are those dates? When they were confirmed?
We have one in January 4th and one on April 13th.
Are you going to release any of this information to the public?
Absolutely.
April what?
April 13th.
April 13th. When will you be releasing this information to the public?
I'll work with my staff on it. I just got the report late yesterday, so I have not gotten the whole details on it just yet.
Is there going to be a plan or some kind of collaboration where the community can access or pay their respects to these remains that are confirmed within inside DOD property?
So, yes, every military installation has a visitors pass program. And so that's something that, as a SHPO, of course, I would totally support, even further accessibility. Again, that's, they own the installation, and I would certainly put the endorsement forward for as much access as possible. Them, of course, having the last say as to what the restrictions would be from there.
Okay. And then I believe, was it last week or the week before, you said that you're going to request some amendments made to the programmatic agreement. Can you just explain in detail what that really means, or some of the concerns that you have, or whether you agree with some of the community concerns that have been put forth?
Yeah, sure. So basically, we know that a lot of attention has been placed on the 2011 PA. As we've come along over the years, we've obviously found things more than what we had initially anticipated. And we've had adjustments made along the way, more restrictive adjustments that put more burden onto the military as we've gone along. And John Mark has the archaeological details on that. But they have complied along the way with the adjustments that we've made. So some of the things that we're doing, not only going back to amending some type of language to solidify those changes, even though they've been doing it. It's also been reflective on current projections of infrastructural buildup. Taking that into account of what we've learned over the past years and making it part of any type of design plans that they've been submitting, making references to Camp Blaz, looking at the holistic aspect of not just, on this side of the fence or that side of the fence, but the holistic aspect of Chamorro villages up north, the significance of the Northern Plateau and how it's been inhabited. So we don't necessarily, or we haven't needed to wait for any type of amendment to the PA, that we've adjusted accordingly as we've gone along to make it more stringent based off of the findings. But definitely, having to go back to that document and make the necessary amendments just to solidify what we've been doing along the process.
Okay, but what specifically do you mean by more stringent? What are the requirements that will make it more stringent?
I'll have John Mark describe that a little bit.
Basically, we've changed up the methodology. I think I explained that the other week when I was here. And the fact that most of the stuff that has been done here on Guam has been done by walkovers, pedestrian surveys. If you do not stick the shovel in the ground, you're not going to find it. That is what has happened up at Camp Blaz. as they started. We put in our objections to all the previous surveys that were done there. As they started, we came to a resolution that they would have monitors there. Then we came to a better resolution that they would monitor the stump pulling and all that rather than doing the resurvey. At that time, that's when we really started finding the sites. As I said previously, Catherine Kerr of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation said that they have had more inadvertent discoveries at Camp Blaz than she's ever seen in her 14-year
So,
career.
Mr. John Mark Joseph, are you saying that the more stringent requirements that you're going to put in is a resurvey of Camp Blaz?
Pardon me?
A resurvey of Camp Blaz? Is that what
Well,
you're...
actually, right now, I mean, my objections were not put in until late, probably 6 months after the bulldozing started. We lost about 600 acres that went down to nothing but coral. So that was a total loss. What they're doing now, they are doing it through those more stringent aspects. As we started on the live fire training range, those methodologies were there. And then when we came to the new machine gun range, then we went into a resurvey because their first objections were done with one resolution when the firing range or the machine gun range, which had not been already bidded out, that was not under contract yet, we were able to step in early, put in the procedures that we wanted to have that were more stringent and get it resurveyed. So that,
Are you going to begin non-invasive mapping of of northern Guam?
pardon me?
Are you going to require non-invasive mapping of northern Guam?
Non-invasive mapping of northern Guam?
Yes.
Well, we've got plenty of mapping of northern Guam. We can get, the satellites and the LiDAR and everything we need there. As far as redoing the survey of northern Guam, I would love to have the military do that. That's something that they would do through their Section 110. I do believe Camp Blaz and them will start doing that. I hope the Air Force continues to do their Section 110. And like I said, we do have the new NEPA project right now for the Air Force.
Thank you. In a September 2017 informational briefing, this was in the past, Guam's former State Historic Preservation Officer, Ms. Linda Uggan, provided significant findings, pointing out that her office previously indicated the Northwest Field as the least favored alternative live firing training range. The SHPO at that time clearly stated that 269 historical properties were counted and recorded. And of those sites, 63 were determined eligible for listing on the National Registry of Historic Places. How many of these sites have been data recovered and cleared?
That for those 63, I cannot tell you, and I'd have to go back and look at the records for those. If they were in the live fire training range, then most of those have been data recovery at this point. If they were not in the footprint of the live fire training range, then they have been preserved in place. I know we were able to take out 6 or 8 sites on one of the ranges because we were able to shift a road and in the planning process, and therefore we were able to preserve those in place.
How many of those sites have been preserved in place?
Let me see, we have the new burial site that's been preserved in place. I cannot tell you exactly how many.
Can you please provide that to committee?
Pardon me?
You don't have the information on hand, correct?
I've got it would take me a while to do
Okay.
that because it's depending on, the total number of sites we had there. compared to where the ranges were shifted. I know we'd, before in our oversight hearing, we stated that we had saved those 6. So as far as how many is actually preserved in place on the northern plateau, there are many that are preserved in place. I can only say that we were able to change to help or ask for the design to be changed on that one firing range, which saved us, I think it was 6 or 8 sites there.
Thank you. So can you please provide, Mr. Lujan, that information to the committee and to also include any additional sites that were found outside of what was initially surveyed at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have several more questions, but I'd like to give my colleagues an opportunity to inquire if they have any questions. I will start with Senator Perez. Do you have any questions, Senator Perez?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for being here. So I was looking over the documents that were provided to us, and there were some things as far as, first of all, the notification upon finding skeletal remains. So when I'm looking over the standard operating procedures, I read it as that once skeletal remains are found, SHPO is not immediately notified. Is that correct?
SHPO is not immediately notified?
Yes, so in the procedures, there's a screening that happens before SHPO gets notified. And so there is certain, I think the Joint Region Marianas is first notified, and their cultural resource manager.
Correct.
And then there's certain steps that are taken prior to SHPO being consulted.
Not that many steps prior to. With my recollection, they do their in-house notifications with their CRM, and then the CRM notifies the SHPO. So it's probably just 1 or 2 steps beyond the findings.
So if you can talk about those steps, can you relay those steps that occur prior to SHPO being notified?
So you have a field work out there. In this case, they have the monitors. Monitor will assume that they found something of significance. They stop the equipment and then use their process of notifying the cultural resource manager on the installation, and then whether it's goes through John Solids. I can't really speak on their chain of information where it goes through, but it goes up pretty quick, and then to ours, notifying us. Usually they call us to give us a verbal and notifying that there's going to be a written notice coming shortly, whether it's going to be that same day or the following day. So we wait for the depending, sometimes John Mark and I will jump into the car and go take a quick look right away. But it depends on what the conversation is, and the magnitude and the significance of it. If they talk about burial findings, then that's something that we stop everything that we're doing and we go take a look. If it's a tooth or something of a fragment of a bone, we usually just wait for the report to come in and get the analysis, and John Mark takes care of the rest on that from the technical standpoint.
Okay, so I'm looking at the procedures, and it's not until step 3 that SHPO is required to be notified. So a lot can happen from the coming upon inadvertent discovery of skeletal remains till when the SHPO is notified. So there's a gap.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gap in the time in which they find it until when SHPO actually is notified. And there's also the potential that SHPO may not be notified should these remains are earlier in time. So that's a cause of concern for me, because
Which document are you looking at, Senator?
Appendix G of the 2011 PA.
Got it, Appendix G. And that could be one of the the changes that we've already made on the new programmatic agreement as far as findings and something that would have to be amended. So I'll take a look at that because I remember discussing with them on to kind of tighten the gap on the notification process on that.
Okay, so what was your recommendation to tighten that gap?
To probably take out one of those steps. So I'd have to take a look at it again.
So without having a look at it, what would your recommendation be to tighten that gap?
Again, I'll take a look at it, but obviously quicker notification to the SHPO's office, and then, quicker turnaround as far as the information transfer over to us.
How about step one, when they find? I think that would be a good recommendation, is to notify SHPO when they come across immediately.
Again, I can't speak on behalf of them and what their process is when it goes from operator of the machine or the monitor that's on the ground and how they transfer that information. I can't see a monitor or an operator calling the SHPO right away. I know they have their own protocols that they have to abide by, and then gets it to us. So I can have a discussion with them on that.
But they automatically notify their own cultural resource manager. Why can't our own cultural resource manager be notified simultaneously?
It could. We'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have, so there's this 54 U.S. Code, Section 307103. So can you explain what that is?
You have to make I don't remember offhand, ma'am. So.
Okay. So this was, if you look at some of the documents that were handed out, I don't know if you received everything. But so this is the reasoning why information about our burials is not provided, or was not provided to the Oversight Chair. So according to the letter, there's a letter dated March 30th, 2021 by Acting SHPO, Carlotta Leon Guerrero.
Thank you. I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, sorry, I was just handed a folder, so this might help.
Patrick, we handed out some documents that the committee has collected through time to the other senators, and so I believe she's referencing Senator Paris. Are you referencing one of those documents?
Yes, it was a response to the Oversight Chair's FOIA requests regarding the burials. And the response that was given was that some of this information is required by Department of Defense to be withheld from public disclosure under federal law, and it cites 54 U.S. Code, Section 307103, and 36 CFR 800.11c.
Okay, I'm tracking now. All right, I see what you're saying. So the overarching reason why, and I think I've explained this to Senator Nelson on a side meeting, was, basically the protection of from looting. That's the primary reason of any type of information of locations being held from the public. In this case, I don't know, John, you were here during that time, so.
Yes, let me see. Am I on? Yeah. I'm sorry, as far as the documents I get in on the PA memos and identifications of historic remains or human remains that come in, when that happens, like the SHPO said, usually we get a call within a day or so of that, and then at that point, then we get a physical document that is on the way that they're preparing. It does go up their chain of command. If somebody finds something at 4 o'clock in the evening, then they're notifying their cultural resource, and then they contact us. As far as releasing that information, every bit of information I get from the federal government, it has a disclosure on it that I am not allowed to share that with the public. They consider our office the public aspect of it, so that is not something that we share with the general public. We know as the Guam agency what that is, what that means, and then we deal with that in the best way we can with the programmatic agreement and the objections we have to that, or whether it's preservation in place. So that's how that is dealt with. It is not information that I can release. It has a disclosure on that. I would be in violation of federal law to release that to y'all or the public in general. That's my job. So that I have to follow.
Okay, if I may, if you look at the actual, what it says in the code, it is not a mandate, it's an authority. And even in the letter that was provided by the acting SHPO, that they can grant the request. So it is not a mandate to withhold information, and this is what the community is seeking. You're seeking access to information, access to knowledge about our history, our cultural history.
Yeah, may I say that, you know, we have, even in recent times, where we've had members of the public call, you know, and asking for laddie sites because they want to move it from this location to somebody's house or something like that. So, you know, hence protective law that, you know, would protect these types of locations from looting. Like I said, the whole intent of the law is the protection of looting. And you know, over the history of Guam, how much of our cultural resources has been taken out of our island and is throughout the world, who knows where. So this basically just is that type of aspect. As far as, you know, in this particular event, it being on the campus of Camp Blaz, then, you know, that would be a subjective issue for the SHPO who's sitting in the seat.
If I may, on the documents I get, it says that the information cannot be released to the public unless it's written without a written authorization from Joint Region Marianas. I have written Joint Region Marianas to ask if I could release that information. I have not received a response back from them on releasing any of that information. So it's not like we have not asked.
It's just the same way, Senator, if, you know, the same respect if it was a local landowner and providing information on somebody's property. You know, if you owned a piece of property that had cultural resources on it, you know, are we privy to release that information to the public? You know, that would be something that we would work with you as a landowner to help, you know, protect it from any type of looting.
Yeah, this is very different, though. I mean, because, like you said, it's behind the fence. So the likelihood of somebody going there is very slim. You know, really, this is, you know, I think the overarching concern here is how is it being protected? I mean, that's the concern, and I mean, what you're saying is really kind of deflecting from that issue.
Well, I can assure you that the dialogue that we have in any type of these findings that's probably my first question that comes out is how can we preserve in place and not move it. So that's always usually the first question that arises when something like this comes up.
Senator Perez, if I may interject, just real quick, thank you. So along the same lines, and as a caveat to Senator Perez's question, Mr. Lujan, is how was the acting SHPO not able to release information, but the governor was through a press release? At the time when the acting SHPO gave the inability to release it due to a statute in the federal law.
Honestly, I haven't even sat down with the previous, with Ms. Carlotta.
Have you sat down with the governor?
I'm sorry?
Have you spoken with the governor about this?
Not yet. I'm waiting to still see her. Like I said, I just got out of quarantine on Thursday, so just give me a little bit more time.
So Mr. John Mark Joseph, how is it that the governor is able to release this information, but the acting SHPO was not?
I'd say that's beyond my pay grade.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Perez, you may continue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so, yeah, so there was also a roundtable in which several recommendations were made, and one of them being that Guam, like other places, like Hawaii, for instance, should implement a tribal council to ensure that, what's happening, basically, it's being monitored with the sensitivity, with the cultural sensitivity, because, that would, I guess, counter some of the shortfalls from many archaeologists that are not attuned to the landscape, not attuned to the culture, and it would help to, I guess, strengthen the protection of our cultural resources with that in mind. I guess, would you support a tribal council, first of all?
If I may speak on the previous archaeology that was done here, that was done under the previous administrations and the archaeologists that was here. The thing we have done is stepped up, like I said, we have stepped up the different methodologies and to work harder to find these. I think that should be given a chance to work. I know the people of Guam are not going to like it. The military surely didn't like it, but you have to stick the shovel in the ground and you have to do it systematically to start finding these sites. It's not going to be fun for private industry. It's not going to be fun for the businesses and everybody else, but people have to step up to the table to do that. We also need more staff to help get their stuff in order to where we can be more transparent. So those are the things that we need, and we need those to get in. We're getting ready to put out the guidelines. I think I'd put them forth in 2012 the first time. Patrick's been on me to get those out again. We had the archaeologists kickback that it was too stringent, but now that we've gone to a new level, and basically I don't want to say a new level, we've gone to what I consider a basic level of archaeological investigation with the military. We're now starting to find the sites. So that's what we want to do overall. I think you will notice a change in what we're finding, and you will notice a change in the culture. I don't think we need a tribal thing, although all information from the public and cultural sensitivity is welcome. Our office is open. Come speak to us, come let us know. I've had individuals come up and tell me different aspects of Guam culture that they knew about that are not readily available to the public. So certain things like that we put down and we share. But I think, we need to be given a chance with the new guidelines and all that, and you're going to have some kickback on that, but that will start finding us more sites, finding us more details, more features about these sites, and basically raise the awareness and the cultural history of Guam.
You have a response, so basically, no to the tribal council, John Mark Joseph?
Pardon me?
So you're saying you do not support a tribal council, is that correct?
Not at this time. I think that we've got some hoops to jump through. First, because we want to have our guidelines straight. That, like I said, I've been trying to get out since 2012. We've got the kickback from the archaeologists that we're requiring too much. So the thing is that these aspects, I think, need to be put in place. If we're not finding new things and having the community input and all at that time, then maybe I think it's a good time. But no, I wrote a 6-page letter, I think, to the legislature approximately 5 years ago concerning that. I'll put that out and resubmit it to here. And my reasons why that I did not think we should have a council at that time. I think we need to have a little bit more within the SHPO's office to get our burials back in the ground, everywhere from the Sandcastle to the Akura to Elig Bridge to Agana Bridge to Maurizo. I was supposed to have a phone call this morning about the Maurizo's burials to get those back in the ground. So those are the things we need, but I also need the staff to work on that, and Patrick's been helping me with that, and we're finally getting that started. So I think if you give us some little bit of time to show what we can do and what we are capable of, I think you will be very happy on that aspect. Because we're just now finding features that they did not know existed. We've changed the aspect of the Guam history from the plateau being temporary to permanent, and we've increased the methodology to where we will be able to find these type of things. We found the pebble floors down at Elig. We've now found them over at Mong. So the things that the archaeologists have been working out here for 40 years, and nobody said anything about them now. But now that we're starting to find things, we've boosted up that methodology, and it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be rough on a little bit of everybody. Everybody's going to complain about the money. Although we're reaching out to other archaeological firms. We've got one today, I think, that is putting in their paperwork for bringing their business to Guam. And we're reaching out to other ones to have more firms here to where the price of archaeology is not skyrocketing
Thank
the
you,
way it
Mr.
is.
John Mark Joseph. I think the question was revolving around the tribal council
Right.
situation. So, Senator Perez, do you have another question that you'd like to ask Mr. John Mark Joseph?
Actually, I have a question for Patrick Lujan, SHPO. So how can you envision the tribal council working with SHPO?
Well, studying how the setup is in Hawaii, you have pluses and minuses to everything, right? And of course, you have the tribal input that provides the cultural background, the historical background. So that's the main purpose of it. And should we have one on Guam? I'm not opposed to it at all. But my focus right now is really, Hawaii has been able to develop their SHPO's office to 42 employees strong, and I've got nine able bodies, 6 of them that's with John Mark doing reviews, trying to review all these permits and all of that, 2 admin and me. So I really appreciate all of your concerns and what you guys feel, but to look over the entire island with 9 warm bodies is a daunting task. The audit that was done a couple of years ago says we need 17, and we're on our way. I've been fighting for more archaeologists, more technicians. We have a couple that's going to be retiring pretty soon. We have one that's retiring in 2 weeks. There's another warm body that's going to be heading out the door. A lot of institutional knowledge with that person that's leaving.
So,
And-
Mr. Lujan,
And so, I'm
please-
just, let me just quickly
because it
finish
has been
this.
2.5 years since you've been the SHPO, and we have not once seen a request for expansion for your office and the struggles that
Oh,
you have been
I've
facing.
shared
So
it.
now that we are here, 2 years later, we are hearing about these challenges. So,
Negative, ma'am.
so
It's been,
I
I've
asked,
been
I
brought it
requested,
up to.
Mr. Lujan, I requested that you send a staffing organization and pattern to our office so that we can work to ensure that you get the support that you need.
Thank you.
Although it is 2 years already into your service of this term.
I have not been silent about it, but I will do as you request. So my
Senator
answer to
Perez-
that question, Senator Perez, is I am not objected to that concept. It brings value. It's worked in other areas, but right now I'm trying to build capacity.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Duenas, do you have any questions at this time?
Constitutes Mossy, Madam Chair. Welcome home, Patrick.
Thank you. No place like home.
So, John Mark, this is the second time, and last time you appeared alone, of course, and so welcome back. As I listen to the questions, I think it's important, particularly from your perspective. This is my question. I mean, isn't the whole study, the whole archaeology, I mean, what's embedded in that, when you do the work you do and the folks that are doing the work they're doing on these sites is to mark the remains, take care of the remains, do what is called for with anything that's found. Isn't the science itself, by its very nature, in tune to what the culture of the environment that you're working in?
As far as the science goes, depending on what school of thought and everything that people came out of. I just got a thing. I sit on the councils of state archaeologists. It was a thing that was just presented to our office that they wanted to do a survey and do in-field analysis of the artifacts. That is almost an impossible task, especially if you're not very familiar, really familiar with the artifacts. Even then, there's certain aspects to them that need to be looked under a microscope and cleaned and all that. So this type of schooling, or wherever it came from, was shot down by most of the archaeologists throughout the country. It is something that had been put along because of it was on private land. It was considered costly analysis and all that. But if you do not do that analysis, then therefore you do not find out whether you need to go to the next stage or not. And so as far as theories of thoughts and the methodology that is done, it has been in archaeology a Wild West kind of thing for many years. That is one thing. If you look at many of the states, they do not, when they put down their guidelines, this is what you follow. And the reason being is because when the National Park Service wrote the regs, they painted it with a broad brush. So it is open to interpretation. What we plan to do is take that interpretation and bring it down to very tight, specific aspects of how to do certain things to where we can find that information. Because if I turn away from in a monitoring aspect of excavation, and you turn away 1 second with that bulldozer going, you either just lost that human remains or you just lost that individual. And now we have new, like I said, we've got new features coming up that have never before been seen on Guam. We have at the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant where they dug into the coral substrate, they put the individual back over that, then they put the coral back over top of that. And when they rolled it out, you didn't see anything but the coral. I imagine there was a marker there, but it was probably a wooden marker, probably in the 50s or whatever, but I understand that the military took that somewhere around 52. So these are the kind of things that we have to start looking at the houses from the 1950s, start asking the community about, did y'all have a family graveyard? Did you have a family plot where their family members are not now being churned up because we're looking at straight coral? We just have to look at our methodology a little different, think about what the housing that were in the places in the 40s, and make sure that we tighten this up. I'm not saying to pick the bar up and put it on a top level. I just want to get it on the small realm to have us some good standards to where we are now finding and learning out more about the Chamorro culture than we knew before.
So I guess, John Mark, what I'm hearing is it's not unique to what's currently being done with the live fire training range and other locations throughout the island. So I guess my follow-up question then is, in your observation of what's taking place on the live fire training range area that's being cleared, are you confident with the information that's being gathered, with photographs, with writings, with whatever is being gathered, and the curation and possible removal or relocation of remains, are you confident that there could be some in-depth cultural interpretation of what's being documented at this point?
Yes, I do, especially with the new methodologies that we put in for the resurvey of that area. We're doing that fairly tight, so we are now, we found that information out when we first started requesting information. They had the road that went up there, and we were asking them about the historic road. And so they said, okay, so they wrote us a little thing on the road. And the road led to, in the story about the road, it was from the 1920s, and the people talked about going to Machinau Village. Machinau Village is not on any of the maps, but it is in the story. So now we know it exists. It may be on the live or on the machine gun range. We do not know that yet, but we're doing that type of in-depth study with that type of increased methodology and all that to find those things out.
So Pat, I'm just encouraged that you're accepting and interested in the tribal council, because I think that is where the link would be the interpretation of the information, and I think what John Mark's leading to is some oral history and some other discussions about when you discover things, of course, especially when we talk to Manamku and others and people who know the area very well, probably gives natural rise to the fact that, oh yeah, I remember my grandfather told me about this or the like. So I'm glad you're open to that, Pat, because I think that's something maybe your organization and your group should spearhead really, because of the fact that that's really where the link would be in terms of interpretation. And I'm encouraged that John Mark believes that we could get some excellent interpretation from the current documentation that's being provided.
Absolutely, Senator, and we've identified that there is a gap internally as well, that kind of needs to be fit with, it's so archaeologically focused that we need to incorporate all of the, the historical, oral history and that surroundings to complete the picture. So we know I've identified that, and I'm working on that as well.
Just in closing on this round, I think all of us, I don't know if all of us, but I like History Channel, and when I watch, of course they're digging for history purposes, so they're more intense. But the fact of the matter is that I'm always fascinated by, and I think John Mark is on the point, being fascinated too about making sure that we continue to understand what those interpretations are. So just Masi, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and just to throw one more thing on that, I mean, just as recently as this morning, he and I, we debate in the office hours at a time regarding different projects, and we're identifying this new design plan that the Air Force has submitted, and we're talking about how stringent we're putting on this project, and making sure that are we doing too much? Are we asking for too much? And we have that type of discussion just to make sure that we're on top of this, and not only that, but to be fair for everybody, the military, the developers, the landowners, and that's where we are as a government entity is really to look at everything across the board the same way.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. Senator Brown, do you have any questions at this time?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm sure for Mr. Lujan and Mr. John Mark Chosa, it's probably not the most desirable time to be here at the Guam legislature. I guess, we're sort of using you for target practice this afternoon. This is a challenging issue, certainly dealing with our history, and I think you can understand the frustration not just expressed by some of the senators here, but just the public because of our history, where our resources in the past perhaps have not been given the due respect that we would like to see. Most of us, our familiarity with a cemetery is Pigo. Where's my great-great-great-great-grandparents buried? I don't know. I know where my great-grandparents are buried. I know where my grandparents are buried. But my history prior to that, I don't know. And I doubt many Chamorros do in terms of where our history is. So therein lies the challenge. But we do know that our ancestors are probably, you may know specific areas, but they might be anywhere and everywhere. And you have the challenge of also dealing with the issue with the construction of the space. And it's one of the largest spaces that has been built on Guam since after World War II. I mean, we all grew up, we knew NAS was there, NCS was there, Naval Station was there, Anderson was there, at least our generation. It was already built. And how they built it, I'm sure, was indiscriminate. They just, like you said, they got the bulldozers and they cleared and they built what they had to build, and they created these military communities around the island. And years later, just like with the environmental issues we're challenged with today, we're trying to come back and say, no, that's not okay. And how do we go about doing it? How do we go about constructing this sizable base and the impacts it's going to have, and yet at the same time still be able to address the due respect that we would like to see for our ancestral remains? And then more importantly, what can we learn from it? Because if we're going to have to disturb their resting place, then there has to be some value to know their life, their history, our history. That we would like to see. We're not always going to have the same level of construction. I mean, when Menengan Hills was built back in the 1990s, it was a sizable project, probably as big as a military base. We haven't had anything that large constructed since then. But when we do have projects that ebb and flow, is it something that we need to look at on the bigger projects where we could require, be it a developer or the military in these type of agreements, to provide the funding so that the government can hire its archaeologists to expand your resources so that they can be present at the sites while the bulldozers are moving. Because you physically cannot be in your small office to do that as different projects are going on around the island. But is that an option that can be looked at? Because really, unless you're at the site, you're not going to know. Yeah. We all talk about Hawaii as if that's the ideal structure. Oh, the Hawaii's got this, Hawaii's got that. Oh, we got to follow Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii. I had a cousin whose husband was in construction. Most of the workers at a site don't want to stop a job because if it stops a job, that stops their income. They're working in the private sector. They don't have the luxury that they're going to get paid just by hanging around. If there is no work for an extended period of time, that put them at a disadvantage. Of course, unless you're unionized, but even that only goes so far. So sometimes they just simply didn't see it.
Yeah.
They just didn't see the archaeological remains that were there, so they didn't stop the project. So let's not kid ourselves. There are vested interests all around. But if we want to ensure that, then maybe that's an option that can be looked at in these agreements now with the space being constructed, so that the interests of the people of Guam is protected and we have some comfort that there's somebody there on a regular basis when clearing and grading is going on that has the eyes and the interests of the public to see that. And there's no reason that can't be done on their nickel, considering how much money is being invested already in the project.
Yes.
No different with major development. I hate to see, we want to target the military, but when we see private construction, like in the case of Pago Bay, and I keep bringing that up because I'm bothered that, our ancestral remains are excavated, and years later they're not reinterned as was required. Projects get built and, we forget about it. And by then, is it the same company that, developed the project? And how are we going to go about ensuring? What's the insurance that they're going to properly reintern the remains in a respectful manner? So there's a lot of inconsistency on how we do it, including government of Guam. I've been to Yilig. Every time I drive by Yilig, probably five days a week. And I've been down there to look at the telephone poles that were installed. I think about that every time I drive subconsciously, and especially I'm going up the hill to Jonia, because I've seen the human remains that were there and some that were fragmented as a result of the installation of those power poles. You see the side profile where they cut into the hillside. Yes. And you see the human remains, the bones and artifacts that are there. The power poles are there, we're getting our power, but nobody was paying attention at the time or caring that, we were disturbing our ancestral remains. And Yilig is a very rich area, as you mentioned, Mark Joseph, about the floor. I remember seeing that floor because we were there at the time at DPW when we were reconstructing the Yilig Bridge. And that was to me, it's like walking in history to be able to see that and what we're learning from that. So I know you have a tough challenge. It's easy for us to come after you. But I think it's just we're expressing our frustration and the public's frustration. When information's not readily available, then it appears, it's secret. There's a shroud of secrecy now going up around the base, and instead of us knowing the information free-flowing, we feel that because it's not, then, what are they doing? Are they really forthcoming? Why aren't we informed? Like the issue came up that there was a reinterment or a ceremony for a burial there. Did that happen with the existing base now up there? Has there since been remains that have been reinterned and a formal ceremony that happened for that?
So,
Shall-
go ahead.
Sorry, no, actually, those remains, none of them were removed, so none of them were reinterred. It was only the piece of pot that was placed for the head that was removed to be analyzed. And that was what the governor had put back. I think in the scheme of the plan was that once we had all the information gathered, once we had the report, and once it was reviewed, then at that point in time, then we would have the press release. Like I said, that's a little bit beyond my pay grade. But I think that was kind of the overall aspect of it. I asked Carlotta, the acting SHPO at the time, to ask the governor, would she put the pot back on the head, because I didn't want the military or the archaeologists doing it. I wanted someone from Gov Guam, the head of Gov Guam, to do that. So she agreed to do that. But that was just an aspect where they could do the preserve in place. It was not that the remains were removed at all. So none of them have been reinterred yet. And they're still going through a lot of the work or the debris and still doing the analysis and the flotations on the soil, so they may come up with other bone fragments, which we would consider, if it was in a place where no other bone fragments were found, we would consider that another individual. So we want to have a good account and a good, make sure that we have all the questions are answered before we present it to the public, because we know we're going to have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, so Senator, so in that particular burial, that's an example of where we came into the picture and we said, you're not going to remove these bones, you're not going to relocate it, because that was one of the options that was presented, that that was supposed to be a parking lot for a building that's coming up. And I said, no, it's going to remain that way, and we're going to build a memorial around it. So that's a success story. I also want to thank you for recognizing the challenges that are put forth as far as implementing some type of charge to the contractors. That, I think, has always been a practice. What we're seeing now, and what we have to do a better job as a government moving forward, is that, and we have a current situation right now with GPA down at Melasso, right? They did that transmission line, and they came up with burials, and they had an archaeological clause in the contract, but the contractor never paid the archaeology firm fully. So what they did is they gave all the artifacts and the bones to the Guam Museum with an incomplete report, analysis, and whatnot. So here I am, because of the NAFTA Mañanata law that dates back to 1990, where you're supposed to rebury them as close as possible to the findings, is I have a willing GovGuam agency partner who wants to do what's right and who wants to rebury them, right? But that company that did the project no longer exists, and that archaeological firm never got paid. And so the work was never done, and now we're in this situation, and this is not the only one. We're working with federal highways that happen. I think US EPA, there's another project that happened with that, with the bridge just over here. So there's a handful of these projects that, even though that there was a budget for it, the contractor, for some reason or another, decided not to use it for the archaeology and paid somewhere else, and now they're gone.
Right, but I have to tell you, that's where you have the legal ability, as if it's GPA who is the customer, GPA should have taken action against the contractor.
Correct, and they're trying to remedy the situation, working with the archaeological firm. So there's a lot of talk and collaboration going on right now. But those are just some examples of the challenges that we have to
I understand,
to
but
deal
I
with.
look at it a little differently with the authorities that you have, and there's so much, let's not kid ourselves, there's so much sensitivity at the time the permits are going through your division in particular. Mm-hmm. In the entire government of Guam, maybe they'd say EPA's up there, but getting things through your division, everyone's like, oh God, what do we need to get through here? But then once it gets there and you give that authorization, it doesn't seem like you feel you have the hammer you need to stop a project. Because I'd stop a project. If they were not adhering to what the requirements were in terms of the conditions that we authorize the project to move forward, then I'd simply stop it. Granted, it gets a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. All the players are at the table immediately to say, okay, what do we need to do to mitigate or correct?
Correct.
But to let things go over time, and then, they just roll you over and keep moving, and then you're like, oh, what do we do here? Because the more awareness that is being brought up about these issues, the more sensitivity that's being brought up about these issues. I mean, the military, yeah, they're the big military, but even they are very conscious, and you know that, you're in service there. They're very conscious about their image. The commanding officer up there ain't worried if he's going to get negative press. Is it going to be in CNN tomorrow? Yeah, of course they are. Nowadays, careers are made and gone. if they don't address and adhere to those issues of concern. So, I mean, there's tremendous advantage that we have that we're not leveraging in our own local community. And right now, we as legislators, we feel like we're on the outside. I mean, that's great. The governor was able to be there and participate, but you know, if there were others included in a more inclusive process, then I think you'd get more buy-in. And then the other issue that was brought up, because you don't have your website up, because you're not able to have that information readily available to what you can provide out there, then people get more frustrated because they're not going to go, you know, looking through paper anymore or knocking on your door. You really need to work on that because that's part of your PR as well. Otherwise, people think, again, you're bringing up those shrouds, the curtains are being covered, and it's secret information, and we're like, hey, these are our historical resources. They might be on base property, but you know, that's a connection to our history and a connection to our past. And it's wonderful that more of our people now are getting more sensitive because it's, you know, we'll go bash the military, like I said, but private projects, we just let it go. And to me, they're the same.
They're the same.
They should be treated with the same degree of respect. So I think those are things you need to look at. Otherwise, the pressure is going to continue to be just on you. And the attacks are going to be directed to you. And instead of us working collectively to move this process forward, we're going to be killing each other and attacking and blaming each other rather than what can we do to facilitate so that our interests are protected, that we have, you know, how can we get resources that are there at the time clearing and grading are occurring, so that we can ensure that our interests are protected and that they are in compliance. Because if it's just their archaeologists work for them. They don't work for the people of Guam. So I think those are things that need to be looked at, you know, so that all the negative energy and anger doesn't just get dispensed on you, which is where it's going right now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Okay, just have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to hand it over to the speaker for her questions. So, Patrick, I discussed this with you in Appendix G. This is the standard operating procedures for the September 2010 Programmatic Agreement. And I just wanted to get some clarification, okay? On page 9, it might be a different page. It's step 3, the identification, age of deposition, and ethnicity. So it says here, if possible, the age of deposition and time period and ethnicity of the remains shall be determined based on skeletal morphology, context, and associated artifacts by, under the supervision of an archaeologist, meeting federal qualifications set forth in 36 CFR 61 Appendix A. And so regarding this, what is the current process in 36 CFR 61 Appendix A? And what type of testing does it include?
I know these are baseline tests to identify the gender and the age. Those are pretty much your baselines. Obviously, first to identify if it's human or not, right? And then anything beyond that would be considered beyond your baseline of if you're going to look for ethnicity or what have you. That's where this primary identification calls for. And, you know, usually John Mark can speak more onto it as far as the qualifications, dealing as a qualified archaeologist.
Do you test for ethnicity every time?
I'm sorry?
Do you test for ethnicity every time?
Usually age and gender.
Okay, age and gender. Okay. And
Well,
part,
if I may, sex, age, and stature.
sure. Say again?
Sex, age, and stature.
Sex, age, and stature.
Right.
All right, thank you. Okay, on the next page, on number 3, same topic, right? It says, the cultural resource manager shall consult with the SHPO and follow section 2 and 3 of the policy guidance in the Guam Department of Parks and Recreation General Guideline for archaeological burials. What role does the SHPO play in this section?
Yeah, the archaeological guidelines.
What
or
is
the
your role
burial
in this
guidelines.
section?
Yeah. Okay, so we're still working off of our reburial guidelines from March 2010. So basically what happens is when they identify any type of positive confirmation of human remains, then we refer back to our reburial guidelines. Section 2 and 3.
So if you refer back to the burial guidelines that are dated from 2010, do you see that a need in the process, do you see within the process that there is a need to update your burial guidelines?
We will have to review it, and if it's needed, then yes. Basically, the reburial guidelines, again, in the grand scheme, is based off of that law, the NAFTA Maninata law, where it has to be reburied as close to the findings, the original findings, if possible, as possible.
Right, and is
So-
there a designation of how we define close to the findings as possible? Because, I mean, I could say 5 miles is close by, 2 miles.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had that type of an argument as of that distance. So with the cases that we've had, as far as reburial, it's been in what's the definition of close proximity? I guess that's subjective to our approval, working with the client, and what's safe. For instance, with the working with federal highways, they found it on the bridge project. All right, where around that bridge would a nice reburial monument could be where it's safe for the public to come and visit? Same thing with the hotels where we worked with Santa Fe on their reburial. All right, what is it okay if we put it like at the corner of the parking lot? So and all of these, it's working in conjunction with our office.
Okay.
I don't personally work in a bubble. Our in-house, I refer to him all the time with Senor Joe Garrido that's there. I respect his opinion greatly, and he's involved in all of our reburial projects and whatnot. So he's
Sure, okay. What's the difference from Måguak village to Sabanfatang?
What's the difference?
Yeah, the distance.
Oh, the distance? Maybe half a mile?
Say again?
Maybe half a mile?
It's 1.5 miles.
Okay.
Are you going to take any type of the remains or bone fragments found in Måguak and move it 1.5 miles away to Sabanfatang?
So the difference between that, it's not a burial, right? It's bone fragmentations that were found. If it was a burial that was found, then that's a whole different ballgame. So that has still actually not been finalized on that plan. That was a suggestion that they placed that with the burials up at Sabanfatang. So I don't think that's been finalized on that just yet. But if it was like a full-up burial, then for sure that's going to stay there.
So any fragments found will be moved to Sabanfatang?
Has not been decided yet. So we're still in.
The reason why
In talks.
I'm asking, right, is because we're determining how we're going to improve our statutes, right? And perhaps, this is something that we need to examine,
Sure.
especially if we're going to go into the semantics of fragments versus burials.
Sure.
And then saying, oh, since this is a bone fragment, I'm going to move this over here, but we're going to keep this full skeletal
It's
it
definitely-
just doesn't
yeah.
make sense,
It's
that
definitely
kind of logic, right?
Yeah.
And
Definitely
so,
a good topic to dive deeper into as
Great.
far as the technicalities are concerned.
great.
You know,
Okay.
so
That's why
definitely.
we want to be consistent, no?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
Senator Brown was saying, outside the fence and inside the fence, we want to be consistent. So let's
Absolutely.
be consistent. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
In number 4, if any other organization or agency comes forward and expresses an interest in participating in the consultation process, they must submit a written request expressing their desire to participate in the consultation process and explain how they are culturally affiliated with the human remains, and their comments will be considered in the overall decision-making process. So this is perhaps a twofold or threefold question. And one is, what does the consultation process consist of? And how would an organization submit the request, and whom do they submit it to? And what is the selection criteria to be considered in order to take part of the consultation process?
Yeah, I requested to, if I can table that and get more information on that. We haven't come across that type of issue since I've been back.
no one
I
has-
understand the language of it, but definitely I'm with you as far as how vague it is, and what, if there's a process, what is the process of that? So I have not put that into practice. And if I can request that, we can table that, and I can come up with something more solid than that.
Great. Yes, please,
Yeah.
thank you.
But the intention of that, though, ma'am, is really, and this is also like within the confines of any type of, at least within the last negotiation period with the programmatic agreement, just to solidify the interest group that wants to be involved, because they will be a stakeholder in the process, and identifying the validity of the organization, that we're not going to not have them involved, but
Right.
just so that's
You're right.
that's where it's coming from.
And also, like you said, you have not dealt with this situation, and this is one of the challenges that we see, is there's no clear understanding of who the consult is or who they will be.
Correct.
And which is why there's so many people, so many of us in the community saying we need to have a burial council, we need to have a tribal council, because these things are not defined. And so if we need to define them in our local statute on what it is, then we're not pulling,
I hear you.
you know what I mean,
Yes.
right? Okay, so and this is what we need to improve upon, is our defining of things, okay? Okay, and number 5, if the remains are encountered during project construction, if a mass burial is indicated, preservation in place shall be the preferred alternative. The results of the consultation shall be placed on file, and CJRM and the environmental and JPAC shall be notified. So this is another 3-part question. 1, how is mass burial defined? Basically, what constitutes a mass burial? And what happens when it is defined? Does construction still continue if the burial is found in the place where the building was to be constructed? And how would you define preserve in place? Can you turn on your mic, please, Mr.
Sure.
John Mark?
Sorry, my
Okay.
So John Mark is saying that 3 or more is considered mass burial. I'll have to look into the definitions from either National Park Service or something like that to get you a definitive answer to that. As far as disturbance of, I think the language on this, as far as when it says preservation in place shall be the preferred alternative, We haven't really come across one that would not keep it in place, right? Whether they're going to readjust the parking lot or the building in case of the Nico Hotel, change the formation of the hotel itself, right? I think the verbiage is in there because just, I don't know, for whatever reason that this project for life or death has to be at this property, this side, this slot. I'm thinking that's why the language is written that way. But my experience, everything that we've put in and say preservation in place, it's been preserved in place.
Okay.
They've abided by it. I guess that you're referring back to the powers that's vested in the office, Senator Brown, in that case. And then lastly, on your question of, I'm sorry, your third question again, Senator? Mass burial, the definition of this?
Well, you define the preserve in place.
Yeah, so the definition for us, preserve in place,
Yeah.
they just don't take it out.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
you're welcome.
So that's all the questions I have at this time. I'll now ask the speaker if she has any questions or any statements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to start off asking again about the information that according to the March 30, 2021 letter from the acting SHPO, Carlotta Leon Guerrero, she stated that the Department of Defense, in consultation with the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, has determined that much of the information requested shall not be released to the public. But I didn't see an attachment to this letter, so I just want to confirm, do you have such a letter or a determination in your possession?
I'd have to look back in the files, ma'am. I'm not sure.
Do you recall that the Department of Defense has determined that the information, I think they were asking about, they asked for preliminary or final reports issued by the Guam Historic Resources Division relative to actions and or directives that instructed or guided the discovery and subsequent removal of human remains at or near the construction site of Marine Corps Base Camp Blaz. You're telling me that the Department of Defense has determined that reports that you created, the Guam State Historic Preservation Office created, could not be released. And I'm asking if you have that in writing from them, their determination.
If I may speak to that, I know Patrick wasn't here. We do not, as the Guam Historic Resources Division, we're not creating that report at all. That report is created and then presented to us for air review to make sure they're in compliance with the laws and the aspects
All
of
right.
the
Well, none of that
research design.
explanation was given in this letter.
So-
All the explanation that was given in the response to the FOIA was that all of the information requested was not allowed to be released according to the Department of Defense. So I'm just asking, I would like to see any determination by the Department of the Defense to your office that says that any particular information is not releasable. And I know, Patrick, you said, or maybe it was you, John Mark Joseph, you said that it's on every document that you look at that this information is not disclosable. Is that true?
Yes. Matter of fact, like I said previously, that the information, it says on those documents that it cannot be released without written permission from Joint Region Marianas. I have written Joint Region Marianas through emails and asked them for a release of what information I can get.
And
I've got no response.
I can believe that that is written on some documents, but I cannot believe that it's written on every document that was requested in this FOIA. Because, in fact, this FOIA requests documents issued by your division. And that's all I see here. But anyways, I want to ask you something else. So, Patrick, do you have letters from the Department of Defense that have made a determination according to the statute that these are not disclosable? that information regarding, I don't know, anything. What are you saying is not disclosable?
I'd have to look at the files, ma'am. I cannot speak out of context right now.
Okay, well, speaking of out of context, when this letter, refers to a statute of, 54 USC 307-103. And then it quotes subsection B of that section, but it ignores subsection A. And I want to read subsection A. Subsection A says, the head of a federal agency or other public official receiving grant assistance pursuant to this division, after consultation with the secretary, shall withhold from disclosure to the public information about the location, character, or ownership of a historic property if the secretary and the agency determine that disclosure may, and then there are 3 factors listed here, and that's why I want to see the letter. I want to know which factor here did they determine. 1, cause a significant invasion of privacy. 2, risk harm to the historic property. Or 3, impede the use of a traditional religious site by practitioners. And I just think, I want to know which of these factors they have found to be the case in Camp Blaz, especially if it's risk harm to the historic property, when we are all locked out of that base. Impede the use of a traditional religious site by practitioners. It's the religious traditional practitioners that are actually locked out of the base. Cause a significant invasion of privacy. I guess I would just like to see the logic of that. So I want to know, I want to see if you've got a letter that outlines their determinations. And then I want to know, in your position, how do you feel about, are you entitled to the information?
Me as a SHPO, yes, I'm entitled to the information.
Right?
Yes.
Are you, John Mark Joseph, entitled to the information as our state archaeologist?
Yes.
All right. And now you said that you are getting this information as a representative of the public. But isn't the SHPO also required under, the National Historic Preservation Act to consult with different people? Isn't that why we have the whole Section 106 process was for consultation?
Yes, we do. And we do consult with the public, and yes, we are the ones that y'all have hired to protect those historic resources.
Right, but we also hired you to consult, to do the consultation part as well, right?
Correct.
And so we did not hire any of you to do this in a vacuum and select which parts of the law we're going to comply with. When we want you to comply with the consultation parts as well. And so you're saying, yes, you consult with the public. Well, let's just talk about that for a minute.
All right, if I may, as far as I know, with the 2011 Programmatic Agreement, we went through public meeting after public meeting.
I'm not, let me, if I may, just ask a few questions, because yes, I'm very familiar with that 2011 Programmatic Agreement process. And what I want to know is, if you are, well, Patrick, do you agree that you're required to consult?
Yes, ma'am.
And in consulting, would you be allowed to discuss what the significance of these properties might be? What your reports might show? Or are we going to consult about things that, without any real facts?
Yes.
So it makes sense, right? That in being allowed and actually authorized to consult and actually mandated to consult, that necessarily you have to talk about what potential findings are there, what actual findings are there in order to have an effective consultation. I think that's been shown all over, that use of these laws, that's what they do. They don't just say, it looks like that. They tell them what it actually is, or what the findings might have been, or what the implications might be, right, to surrounding historic sites, all of that.
Correct.
The, when the Department of Defense forbade you from releasing information, and then the governor mandates you to release information, do you believe you are authorized then to release the information?
I'm sorry, I wasn't here that time, ma'am. So I'm really, I have my, I wish I can speak more on it if I was here, but, I know this has been a topic of discussion, whether or not it was release it or not release it. And so I'm trying to refrain from comment because I wasn't here. So I defer to John Mark if he has anything to say on the topic.
The reason why I ask these questions is because when I compare it to, there's several things going on at the same time. You know this, right? And I agree. Your office is overwhelmed. Yes. And but I just don't think that that's a reason to not do everything we can do. So,
Sure.
When the 2011 Programmatic Agreement was being negotiated, eventually, maybe not at first, but eventually, when people start to find out about it, there was a lot of consultation. We were having meetings up at, what's the name of the place up there at Adelup where the big latte is, the meeting room? The Hall of Governors or something? Yeah, we were having meetings in there because we needed a big space to fit all the parties who had been invited by the SHPO to consult on this programmatic agreement that was very contentious at the time because at the time it included Pauget. And it was because of opening up to these consulting parties that we were allowed, or we were successful, I believe, in stopping, the firing range from being built at Pauget. It's because we allowed the public to know what the plans were, to understand how it was being negotiated, and to get information. And so I always see that as a success. Like, the more you open it up to the community, just as Senator Brown has said, better, response you're going to get. And I think we actually had, there were instances where I can point to your office as having even better than a tribal council, because we're not limiting it to 5 people or 3, people exclusively on the council. We were opening it up to the public as much as possible and asking them for their input. And I think that's important because, I just believe it even with myself. So I'm not trying to offend anyone, but no one knows everything. We don't even know the significance of some of these places before we ask the people who have lived there. And that's another thing. I just don't think that was really done for places like, where they're building Camp Blaz right now. I know the landowners or the people who were there during the war, and they just don't believe that they've been consulted, right? To find out really what do we believe is in this area. And I thought that's part of, the archaeological practice, is to find out from everyone who knows about anything in this area, as you described, John Mark, right? That this is how we're going to know whether there's a family burial ground or anything, just anything that those people who use the land might know. I thought I just wanted to point to that because you mentioned it, and that it was also brought to my attention, during this whole process. Those people who used to live there, I'm talking about the Arteros, they've never been asked even what the names of these places are supposed to be, right? And so they always talk about that type of stuff. And then while we're talking here, one of you mentioned that Machinau village is, I don't know, was just popping up, but I got a text that was actually on a pre-war map, or it always appeared on the pre-war maps. But I guess I'm back to the consultation process. I really am going to point to the consultation process because, for example, the most recent programmatic agreement to be negotiated was the MIT. And I thought we were going to have a great public consultation on the MIT. We had an opportunity to negotiate that in every way that we could ask for. It was a huge, it's a huge undertaking that was being proposed. It's live fire training. And we talked a lot about this. We had meetings. I tried to form a working group, right, that incorporated the SHPO's office. And even when you came on with the Guam Preservation Review Board members, with the governor's office, with the Attorney General's office, with some senators who were interested, just to give the SHPO, who was the only one who, in the end, we all realized was going to be the one that's going to negotiate on our behalf, the only one technically whose signature is going to count on that document, that we were going to back you up. We were going to give you everything we could possibly give you, ideas, the best, what the public felt, input, and all of it. But in the end, I don't know. The consultation meetings with the military, they ended with the public, and they took place only with maybe you and the military. I don't know, because we weren't invited anymore. And then the agreement was signed. And then we didn't get any, those things that we had talked about. And now we keep hearing, don't worry, we're going to renegotiate the 2011 PA, or we're going to change it, we're going to amend it, and we're going to include all the things we want. Well, I find that very hard to believe. Like, if those were things that were achievable for us, then why haven't we negotiated that? As our state archaeologist has said, he's been working on new burial guidelines for a while. I guess he's sending them back and forth with military archaeologists who are rejecting some of the items. But, if that was the case, we could have, worked it so that that gets negotiated in there, right? And that's the power of community. It's when one person in a negotiating room, cannot get that agreement, a community behind you would help you to get that agreement. We've seen it, and I just think that going for anything less than that is cutting off your own abilities, and it's really shortchanging the public who are entitled, I think, to have that type of input. So that meant opportunity. For example, we talked about the burial policies. Also, so we're, according to the 2011 PA, I've been to those PA annual meetings, you guys know that. For years, we were going to the meetings saying some of the things that the military promised, according to this agreement, are not being implemented. For example, the repository was one of them. Took years. The other one was a cultural center or museum, right? And so they wrote papers to tell us, they finally came up with an agreement with the white repository, and then they told us that they tried for the museum, it was not possible, so their end of the bargain was over. And I'm not satisfied with that either, because when the agreement was signed, all of those things had to have been factors, right? But anyways, what I'm getting to now is, when we did the MIT, it was also another opportunity to take care of this repository, right? So I think you entered into an agreement together with the UOG and CHamoru Affairs regarding this repository that's being built at UOG. UOG is now asking us for millions of dollars just to open that thing. That it's not functionable unless the government of Guam is going to put up millions of dollars to open it, to staff it, to, run it so that the artifacts can be stored properly in there. And everybody's perplexed. Wow, You know, was that the deal? Is that our obligation now to put up millions of dollars to take care of these things? And they want to know, why wasn't that negotiated in the MIT agreement, right? Or all of these things that are like left hanging. The same thing when you say your office is overwhelmed. I mean, that was a big part of the 2011 PA negotiations, was how we're going to make sure, right, that your office is not overwhelmed. We're going to ask for certain positions. Well, we've learned so much since then about the scale, right, and how much work it takes from your office. It takes both of you full time. And that really does shortchange, you know, protection all over the island. And so that type of thing, I just think these are all valid issues, and you've tried, you know, in some ways to deal with them, but I just think if we don't act collectively and we start doing this, you know, I'm going to do this thing, they're going to do this thing, I'll do this if the governor tells me, and I won't do this if, you know, we are going to end up in a haphazard types of agreements. We're putting up more and more obligations on ourselves as opposed to on the party who we're making the agreement with, and I don't know, that's just doesn't seem to me to be the way to go. And then also while you were talking, there were a couple things about, well, one of them is, well, I'm talking about input, the Preservation Review Board. Under Guam law, the Preservation Review Board, you know, meets with the SHPO, but they are also the same members who serve on the Guam Preservation Trust. And, but the Preservation Review Board in that capacity has not met. And it's that even, you know, I'm perplexed. How could we, you know, if you don't want my input, I guess I have to live with that. But they're a Preservation Review Board. That's just more eyes, more ears, more ideas, you know, more negotiating tactics, more everything. On you know, before that MIT was finalized, they didn't have any meeting. They're telling me now they haven't received notice of the meeting that you just announced for next week. So I don't know. I'm just, I guess, pointing out that we can do better. And I don't think this is, as one of the other senators referred to it, as some target practice. I don't think that at all. You know, we take this stuff seriously. You guys take this stuff seriously. And I thank you for the work that you do. But I'm just asking you, and you know I've always asked you this. It's like, we're only going to get better if we can get more transparent, if we can ask the public for their input, not tell them to send in comments, and there's no dialogue. That's not consultation in my book. Because Patrick, for example, you know, the MIT, one of the first meetings we had, I think it was, you know, Mr. Lotz, who's on the Preservation Review Board, who kept asking, how can we consult if we haven't seen the maps of the properties that will be impacted? You know, like the information that we're supposed to be consulting on. For many, we never seen that. Then we asked the public to comment on it, and they had not been entitled to have some of that information, right? Or it's overwhelming for them. They're not able to come to any type of process where they can, you know, have a dialogue, where you can help educate them. It's like a huge burden that we're placing on the public as opposed to using our government resources to help them. And I think helping Chamorros to understand Chamorro history as we go is the greatest thing you're going to do. I really believe that. And so I'm hoping that any further negotiations that we have, you never agree to just not disclose information. I mean, that the discretion is with you. And I trust if the discretion's with you. But if you're going to tell me, oh, because we signed an agreement that says, you know, you can sign an agreement that says, you know, that we're going to bypass that law and it's going to be up to the Guam SHPO what information is disclosed. I believe that. And I think you're entitled to do that when you consult. And so, I don't know. I just find that it's just not feeling satisfactory to me as a member of the public that I'm being told you're not entitled to information because the federal government is telling us, you, the SHPO, and you, our state archaeologists, that we can't release this information. You're there for us. And the information is not for the office. The information, the only reason why why we should have any archaeological studies is so that Chamorros will know about Chamorros history. I mean, isn't that the purpose of the consultation, so that we can honor all of that? And that would be the purpose of a burial council, is so that those people whose ancestors are buried are going to be the ones to take care of them, pay, honor. And I want to thank you, John Mark, by the way, for pointing out that, I think at the very least that whatever was taken from the graves be put back into the graves. If these are Chamorro graves by a Chamorro, it was a nice thing to do. I'm not satisfied because I want the public to know all about that. I want them to be able to pay homage. I want them to be able to go there and see, these are the grounds we're talking about. This is the area, right? This is Måguak, right? This is where Lati, Lusong, earth ovens, everything, this is where they lived. This is where they did these things, these types of activities. I still believe that access should be strengthened. And the only way we're going to strengthen that is if we back you up in your negotiations. And so the public access agreement that was negotiated in the 2011 PA is so obviously not working, right? When I think you pointed out how many people have taken advantage of it. Because the agreement is you get access if you give me so many days notice, and then you get access only if the military accompanies me down to the beach, to Haputo, or if the military accompanies me to go pay respects to this. I don't know. And I just think that we can do better. But I know we got a lot of work cut out for us, so thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to tag on to what the speaker was saying, that in the roundtable that we had a couple of weeks ago, I think, there was a question about, if we knew more about the details of what was in the burials, that would provide a lot of meaning to our people. I mean, I think there is a way to work that without having to reveal or disclose the location of these sites. Is that something that can be negotiated, or is that allowable to provide at least the details without having to relay the location?
As far as like the results of the studies of?
More so, whether it's a woman with a baby, right? Yeah. Female skeletal remains holding a baby, a skull, just the descriptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all part of the study that's required, that comes months later. But the essence of time that we're dealing with is the how fragile the bones are. So the exposure has to be very minimal before so they can do their measurements, do their studies, and then put protective soil layers on it, or else it's going to become very brittle. That's why it lasted, hundreds, if not 1,000 years in that protected soil, right, in that pocket of coral in that one area, right? So that's one of the amazing things of that is they found, a pocket in the coral and made it a burial site. And so the studies, has that study been completed yet?
If I may, they did a preliminary study, and basically gathered as much information as they could without exposing them for too long. So we've got a kind of a preliminary aspect I went over last time with the different sex, age, and stature that they had given us at the time. They may refine that through the photographic documentation that they did, but they did not do the excavations and take them to the lab to do analysis. So that's going to limit what we know. We've got that preliminary report,
Sorry,
but we're months
excuse
down
me.
the road.
The question was, can that information be made available?
Well, once
to
we
the
have
public.
it, yes, and I made it available from the preliminary aspect during our last meeting.
So
I don't know if you were aware of that, but I made that available and
Okay.
spoke about each one of those individuals.
Okay, so this preliminary information can be provided to the public? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right, and I
come in-
provided it to the
So
public last time.
we do have on the Guam legislature website, there is military buildup section. And so I think, I would like to recommend that any kind of information that you receive can be forwarded to, the oversight chair or of the, to provide that information to the public, because the public is really hungry for that information. They want to know more about the cultural findings, the burial findings, perhaps, without having to give away the details of the location.
And if I may, Senator, certain burials, as we find like at the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant, once we get more information out about that, then we will be putting a thing in the paper, I think, to express to the public, because those burials are probably mid-20th century, there to see if we can find those, the kin folk of those individuals, and see if we can help return them to their families.
Okay, thank you, much appreciated. So the other thing was, I think it was since 2019, I know COVID kind of put a stop to a lot of things, but back in 2019 was the last time senators had a site visit. Is there an opportunity to have another site visit for officials?
We can make an arrangement, put in a request.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I know in one of the joint informational hearings that we had last term, there was a mention about invoking Stipulation 14, which would amend the programmatic agreement. And that was, I believe, your suggestion. So are you still pursuing that? And what would you propose as changes to the PA?
Yeah, again, just getting back on island, I'm going to need some time to review all of that to include the amendments of the other PA. So I just requested a little bit more time on that. I'm still doing some house cleaning, so to speak, in the office at this time.
All right, thank you. And then I guess another question that I have is, who will have access to the memorials and the monuments? And how often will the community be given access to, pay respects and to honor the sites of Måguak, the destruction of that village?
Yeah, I think that's unknown right now, but something that has to be, worked out with the Marine base. So right now we're still in the review of the monument itself, but as far as the access and all of that stuff, that we haven't had that discussion yet.
And are there any procedures in place to protect artifacts from being removed by contractors on the field?
Nothing different than what's been in place right now.
What is that?
You want to describe how they remove artifacts and what happens?
Right. At this point in time, when you say contractors, you're talking about the archaeological contractors?
Anybody working on the site?
Anybody working on the site. The only ones that are allowed to remove and do data recovery on the artifacts are the the qualified archaeologists that are hired by the military for that project. Other than that, once the data recovery is completed, then there is no removal and there is no collection done. Therefore, the site is considered destroyed at that time. Archaeological is a destructive method anyway, and at that time, the information has been extracted. Then basically it is turned over back to the contractor who does its work. If they find anything at that time, they go through a cultural sensitivity class. If they find anything else, then they contact also the cultural resource management and stop working. They put out a buffer zone for that until it is cleared.
Okay,
And-
so basically you're saying just the cultural archaeologist, but, is there anything that would monitor, I guess, is there a monitor in place to ensure that other contractors are not, lifting these things?
Right now, I think that most of it is the work that is being done there is monitored. All the work is being monitored unless they've already cleared that area of any cultural resources.
And how many monitors are there?
Right now, I cannot say. I do believe Marine Corps base alone has, I know they have approximately 3 archaeologists, 1 or 2 are monitoring, but they have probably, I think, 4 companies there working that they hire as monitors. So I'm not exactly sure for each one that they have. Each project, they may have 2 to 3 different monitors on that working, depending on how many pieces of equipment they had.
Yeah,
That's what we
I
were-
remember doing the, I guess, the annual PA workshop. There was, I believe there was a negotiation to have monitors, but I think it was mentioned that there wasn't enough to cover all the activity that was going on simultaneously. You're saying there are 3. Is that sufficient to cover all the activity that's going on at one time?
Well, basically, like I said, there are 3 archaeologists there. They're not the ones, they're contracting out to other archaeological firms to do their monitoring. So depending on how many different places and what kind of work they're doing, it depends on how many different monitors that they have on that. We've definitely stepped up
Yeah,
the number.
we can get that
So I
information.
appreciate, I appreciate if you can get that information.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the last I know, one movement that they were having, they had at least 6 monitors out at one time. So
Okay. In regards to the burials at Måguak, who had the final decision in the determination of those burials?
in regards to final decision of what?
So, how Måguak was destroyed. So who made the determination? Who had the final decision of what to do with those burials?
I would say as far as leaving them in place and not moving them. That was me.
Okay, so what about the ones that were moved?
There's no burials that have been moved. Maybe bone fragments have been moved, but that again, it's a different classification as burials.
Okay, and how about those bone fragments? Who had the determination for that?
The skull fragment?
Just bone
Yeah, I remember there was,
If it is, most of the bone fragments, I can say that have been found there, have been found in back dirt piles, spotted by archaeologists as they have been monitoring different aspects, whether they were newly created back dirt piles or back dirt piles from the 1950s. That's where they're finding the bone fragments. And so they're not finding a complete individual, and they're out of any type of context or burial context at that.
okay, so I recall in the workshop, there was a mention about relocating some of those bone fragments into like a mass pit or a mass location.
Oh, yes, I imagine each one of those, and like I said, we do not have the reports yet. The reports are still coming. They do have sub-meter things of where those bone fragments were found, whether there was a back dirt pile or whether, it was in a different location.
Okay, so who made that determination, the final decision for that?
Pardon me?
Who made the decision for the movement of those fragments, bone fragments?
Who makes the decision on the movement of the fragments?
Yes, that's correct.
That is written into our basic standard operating procedure of how we look at those. I think I presented that to the group the last time.
Right. Mr. John Mark, the Senator Perez is asking who makes that final determination of what happens to what is found. Is it you, the SHPO, or is it another individual?
Like I said, that's already been decided in the standard operating procedures.
But you're not answering the question. What does the SOP say then?
So we follow those procedures as if it's a bone fragment that is not in context, then they are able to remove that.
Who's they?
The archaeologist on site, the one that is doing the work.
Who hired the archaeologists?
That would be Joint Region Marianas through McCagg.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Perez.
Right, thank you. And so I believe also there's the research protocol that needs to be approved by SHPO, is that correct?
Yes, so
And-
they would send in a preliminary report, we review it, we make comments prior to any type of final report is submitted.
And does that include movement of bone fragments?
Yes.
Okay, so then you're ultimately the one that makes the determination.
Based
Or-
off of the SOP, yes.
So you're confirming that you're the one that makes the determination?
At the end of the day, it falls on the SHPO shoulders.
Okay. How many burrows have been found at Andy South?
Let's see, Andy South.
Counting a quick count of 6 findings so far.
Okay. And what is the status of the historic sites in those areas?
Status of the historic sites at Andy South.
Right now, we're still working on consultation with them on what they find and where they're finding it. What we're finding is with their improved methodology and testing, that one site that they had found is running into another site. So therefore, it's one large site rather than 2 different sites. So that's what we're looking at now. We're consulting with them to do more testing throughout the area to make sure that we know exactly how large these sites are rather than the previous walkover type of methodology that they were doing.
All right, thank you. So I know there's this idea of historic districts. This idea I think is, kind of taken hold with the Tailalo Texan area, that it's really one contiguous site, just like what we're seeing with Fena. And so I know that in one of the workshop discussions, that there was a mention that this is perhaps the new way of perceiving preservation, that, it's not just one individual artifact, it's a whole landscape. And so, kind of what you're saying now, it seems to kind of fall in line with that. How is that moving forward? Now that we know, like, all this information that has come to light, right, in the recent couple of years about historic districts, what is the movement forward? Are research designs going to now have a certain level of standard when it comes to seeing these as districts rather than individual historic sites?
And that's a good point, ma'am, because of that, we've changed the outlook on again, going back to the holistic picture as compared to just this box that you're going to be building on and doing a survey in this box. It's what's combined, right? So what's on the other side of the road, because most of these roads that are running up there weren't there, hundreds of years ago, right? And so we're collectively forcing the methodology to change, and so to speak, in the mindset of what was there nearby and as one whole village, as opposed to this being Dededo, this is Jigo, there's a cutoff between NCS and Anderson. So definitely when we review these research designs now, we're encompassing that mindset and changing the outlook and the methodologies of how these things are being done based off of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. One last question. Mr. Lujan, the status of the website. We have been getting calls from stakeholders that they're not able to access the website. They're not able to see any of the plans that are ongoing as far as historic preservation. What is the status of that? And has it been down during the whole pandemic?
Negative. I think that just went down a couple of months ago, so that's one of my first things that I'm working with the staff to get back up. So it's an internal issue that fell through the cracks while I was away.
Is Office of Technology not assisting you in this matter?
It's a contract, so it's outside of their realm that we're dealing with.
So you contracted someone else outside of the government to maintain your website instead of utilizing Office of Technology?
Last year we did. Yes.
How long is the contract for?
It was for a year.
Has that contract expired?
It did.
Have you asked Office of Technology to assist you?
I will.
Okay. All right. Glad we could help with something. Okay, so just a recap of some of the items that we look forward to seeing some action on.
Yes.
That you will be providing the community with an update of the confirmation of burial sites and what was found. Improving the process and procedures for providing adequate public participation. And this goes to, all the activities on Guam, not just specific for military matters and development, but also for development on Guam itself. And then also to clarify the governor's authority for releasing the information that was found in the November, I think it was, that was found in November 2020, but she issued a press release, I believe, several weeks ago, after the acting SHPO stated a federal regulation that prohibited her to do so. So is this federal regulation moot? Improving on your mission and vision as a State Historic Preservation Officer and the Guam Historic Preservation Office in regards to the regular board meetings that you should be having. Improving upon or finalizing your 5-year plan. And then also on the Appendix G SOP, Step 3, items to be more defined and clarified in that section that we discussed. And then improving on the consultation process and what that consultation process entails. And if we need to improve our statute to address who is the consultation, what is the process that we would be doing the consultation, what is the standard operating procedures for the public outreach for consultation, if we need to write in statute to make that very clear for future state historic preservation offices, way beyond our time here, then we will do that. And then lastly, and most importantly, your organization model and your staffing pattern and the items that you need to assist you with moving the projects within your office, because it looks like you are severely understaffed, and it's been that way for quite some time. I hope we would have talked about this 2 years ago we're talking about it now, and so let's see what we can do to work together to make to meet the requirements that you need for your office. Do you have any questions? Any last questions, speaker? No? Say again? Oh, and the speaker just reminded me, 3 years ago, you guys were given money also to increase your force structure, your manning. So
Yes.
what happened with that?
So an attempt was made to, number one, establish an account through DOA. That was done. I actually looked at that law again, Senator Talahi. There's clarity that needs to be made because I'm not sure if that's like a one-time deal or an annual deal. It just says that specific amount. It doesn't say if it's done on an annual basis or whatnot. I've been working with GPT on that transfer. Not sure if they're having some difficulties as far as receiving their allotted amount from DOA or I don't know who's the one that does that. But yes, that has been also an effort that's I've been trying to accomplish as well. So hopefully, if you can just review that real quick on your side, whether that was a one-time deal or an annual allotment, because that makes a world of difference on how that's approached. Nevertheless, any help is great help.
It's
from-
supposed to
from
be
you guys.
annual allotment, but we will look
Okay,
into that.
Roger, thank you.
Yes.
And that would change the dynamics of how things are planned and approached. So thank you for that.
Okay. All right, and so one last question. Who takes possession of artifacts and bone fragments when discovered?
So after it's curated, the curation process, basically it's analyzed by the hired archaeological firm, whomever that may be. And
Say again, who is it?
the hired archaeological firm?
Okay,
Yes. So they do the analysis, and then the process is, with proper curation through the Guam Museum. So, but the SHPO is involved throughout the process with at the front end of the project and then at the completion of the project. But at the end of the day, the way it's supposed to be is it falls into the hands of the Guam Museum through the care of the archaeological firm that's doing the project.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. This was a very good oversight hearing. I think, Mr. Lujan, you can see that we want to help you.
Thank you.
We understand the challenges that you are facing, but we also want to help you improve your office and provide better measures for the whole island of Guam when it comes to historic preservation. And
Madam
so,
Chair, when you're done, I just wanted to make one comment.
say again, Senator Brown?
I just want to make one comment when you're done.
Okay, you can, let me pause and I'll hand it off to you. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. I'm sure you'll continue these hearings because I think it's very informative and helpful for us and the public because there is a lot of interest in what's going on at the base with regards to the archaeological work and the information. But John Mark Joseph, you mentioned one point that you had sent letters and you hadn't gotten any response to those letters. Is that something that you guys are moving up the chain? Because I'm sure if the governor were to knock on their door, they would be more responsive. Because that does concern me if you're providing inquiry to them and not getting any response. I mean, I don't think the people of Guam want to feel like they're being ignored. So what is being done with that? If you don't get a response, is that just the end of the story? Or is it go up the flagpole and, someone who's within their authority to raise those issues further so that we can get an answer and not feel like we're being rolled over on these issues?
Right, at that point in time, it was in between, I guess, our meetings here that we had, and I had sent that up and copied the acting SHPO at the time. So I imagine that went to her, that was her in her lane to therefore move it up the chain or to see further seek further response from Joint Region.
Well, I just think we want to have that dialogue. I mean, if this becomes a one-sided story, it just doesn't help us facilitate where we need to go. And so I hope that there's follow-up. I mean, now that you are back, Mr. Lujan, hopefully you can help facilitate that through your director and through the respective parties so that we can get the response, because I don't think any of us want to feel ignored on these issues. We may not always agree, but I think by all means we want to make sure that our concerns are heard, particularly as this project is ongoing. I mean, if our concerns are not addressed, by all means, let's put that on the table. Because I've dealt with the military, I've dealt with them on the environmental cleanup projects. Trust me, I know they're very sensitive to the concerns, and they're very sensitive to criticism. If they feel that, you know, they're being attacked, and if there's legitimate evidence of it, then by all means, it's deserving of them. But I think we need to assert ourselves a little more. And as mentioned earlier, I mean, definitely what information you can start, and I do recommend you start working on your website, because then we're going to start collaborating on what do we do with departments that are not currently following the law to facilitate information to the public, because there's going to be more demand in this legislature to do that. And it'll certainly ease the burden on you in getting that information out there. But I do appreciate it, Madam Chair, in your pursuing this issue, because we all have a lot of interest, especially learning more about our history. And ensuring that our remains, you know, be it the physical body of our ancestors or our artifacts, are properly respected, and certainly we can learn. I mean, if they're going to be disturbed, then there has to be some benefit coming back to our people. So I certainly appreciate your initiative in continuing to follow up on these issues on behalf of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay. All right. So as I was saying, Mr. Lohan, thank you very much. Thank you, John Mark Joseph. I think this has been a very productive oversight. We look forward to assisting you in getting the personnel that you need, and also assisting you if you need any help with reaching out to the community, allowing for a broader public outreach rather than just this one-way dialogue with a website that's down currently. So, and also if you need us to advocate to improve your website, Office of Technology, we will. Okay, it is now 4:37 in the afternoon, and this oversight hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. God bless and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.